My name is Dorothy Mae Williams. I was born in 1,956 inches, a small house on Clover Street in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I have lived in this same city for every one of my 68 years. I raised my children here. I buried my husband here. And now, in what was supposed to be the quietest, most peaceful chapter of my life, I sit at this kitchen table with a folder of bank statements in front of me, a cold cup of coffee to my right, and the kind of clarity that only comes after you've been hurt badly enough to finally stop making excuses for someone you love. I want to tell you what happened. All of it. Because I think some of you need to hear it. I taught third grade for 31 years at Elmwood Elementary. If you've ever met a third grade teacher, you already know something about me. We are patient people. We are nurturers by nature. We believe, sometimes past the point of reason, that people can grow and change and do better if you just give them enough time and enough grace. I gave my whole career to other people's children believing that. And I gave the last several years of my life to my own son believing the same thing. My husband Gerald passed 6 years ago. Prostate cancer. We had 34 years together, and I won't pretend the grief wasn't something that nearly took me under. Gerald was a steady man, a quiet man. He worked for the city for 27 years, and when he retired, he used to sit on the back porch every single morning with his coffee and his crossword puzzle, and he would say, "Dorothy, we did all right. We really did all right." I miss that man every day, but I keep going, because that is what you do. After Gerald passed, I had his pension, my teacher's retirement, and the house, which was paid off. I was not wealthy by any measure, but I was comfortable, stable. I did not need anyone to take care of me. And I was proud of that. My son Marcus is 38 years old. He works in software engineering for a tech company based out of Charlotte. He has been with that company for 11 years, and he earns, as he has told me on more than one occasion, a very good salary. His words, not mine. He married his wife Chelsea 6 years ago. Chelsea is from money. Her family has a large home in a suburb outside of Raleigh, and her father plays golf 3 times a week and talks about his investments the way other men talk about the weather. Chelsea is not unkind. I want to be clear about that. But she has a way of looking at things, and at people, that makes you feel like you are always just slightly not enough. Marcus and Chelsea have one son together. My grandson Deshaun, who just turned 22 and graduated this past spring from NC State with a degree in mechanical engineering. Deshaun is a good young man. Quiet, like his grandfather, works hard. He and I have always had a tender relationship. He used to come to my house after school when he was small, and I would help him with homework at this very kitchen table, and he would eat whatever I cooked without complaint and tell me, "Grandma, you make the best everything." That boy holds a piece of my heart that nobody else can touch. Let me tell you how the trouble started. Or rather, let me tell you when I first noticed it, because I think the trouble started long before I was willing to see it. About 2.5 years ago, Marcus called me one evening and said he needed a favor. He and Chelsea were trying to refinance their home and consolidate some debt, and there was a short-term gap in their finances. He asked if I could transfer him $3,000. Just temporarily, just until the refinancing closed in a few weeks. He said he would pay me back before the end of the month. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He is my son. The end of the month came and went. I did not bring it up. I told myself he was busy. I told myself the refinancing probably took longer than expected. I told myself the things that mothers tell themselves when they do not want to look too directly at what is happening right in front of them. 2 months later, he called again. This time it was $1,800. A car repair for Chelsea's SUV, he said, and an unexpected insurance bill. He would pay me back everything together, he said. All of it at once. As soon as things settled down, I transferred the money. Over the next 1.5 years, there were more calls. Some for smaller amounts, 200 here, 500 there. Some for larger ones. Marcus needed to cover a home repair. Marcus needed to help cover costs for a trip his family was taking to see Chelsea's parents. Marcus needed a little help with Deshaun's graduation party planning, because Chelsea wanted it to be special and things had gotten more expensive than they expected. Every time I said yes. Every time, I told myself it was temporary. Every time, I moved money from my savings account into his, and I felt that particular mixture of love and unease that I did not yet have the courage to examine too closely. I am a woman who keeps records. Gerald always said I could have been an accountant if I had not fallen in love with children. I have a filing system in this house that my daughter-in-law once called, with a little smile that I chose not to interpret, very thorough. So after that second call from Marcus, I started keeping a log. Nothing elaborate, just a small notebook with the date, the amount, and whatever reason he had given me. When I finally sat down and added it all up, I had to read the number twice. $24,200 in 22 months. I sat with that number for a long time. I made myself a fresh pot of coffee. I went and stood on the back porch where Gerald used to sit, and I looked out at the yard, and I thought about the fact that $24,000 was more than a third of what I had set aside beyond my monthly income for emergencies in the future. I thought about the fact that I had been eating at home more often, skipping my annual trip to see my college roommate in Atlanta, putting off replacing the washing machine that had been making a terrible noise for 7 months. I had been doing all of that while transferring money to a household where my son earned a very good salary. I did not confront Marcus. Not then. Because even in that moment, I was still trying to be fair. I was still telling myself there might be something I did not understand. Maybe there were expenses he was embarrassed to tell me about. Maybe Chelsea's family, for all their appearances, was not actually doing well. Maybe Marcus was in some kind of trouble he did not know how to talk about. I gave him the benefit of every doubt I had. What I did do was stop automatically saying yes. The next time he called, I told him I needed a few days to look at my account. He sounded surprised, and then he sounded fine, and then he called back 2 days later and said not to worry about it. They had figured it out. I noted that in my book. Whatever the urgency had been, it had resolved itself in 48 hours without my help. That told me something. Spring arrived, and with it came Deshawn's graduation. I cannot tell you how much I had been looking forward to that day. I had watched that boy grow from a small child into a young man, and I had been there for so many of his milestones. I had framed his high school diploma and hung it in my hallway. I had mailed him care packages during his first semester at NC State. I had prayed over that child more nights than I can count. About 3 weeks before the ceremony, Marcus called to give me what he called a heads up. The graduation ceremony itself was going to be a big, crowded event, he said, and parking would be a nightmare, and the seats were limited in terms of how many guest tickets each graduate received. Deshawn had gotten his allotted tickets, and between Marcus, Chelsea, and Chelsea's parents, who were flying in from Raleigh, the tickets were accounted for. He said he hoped I understood. He said they were planning a small family dinner the following weekend, so I could celebrate with Deshawn personally. He said it would be more intimate that way. More special. I said I understood. I said that sounded lovely. I said to tell Deshawn I was proud of him. When I hung up the phone, I sat in my chair by the window for a long time without moving. I want to be honest with you about what I felt. Part of me was hurt immediately. The deep, wordless kind of hurt that does not need analysis. But another part of me, the patient part, the third-grade teacher part, was still trying to find the reasonable explanation. Guest tickets were limited. It was true that NC State graduations were large events. Chelsea's parents had flown in, and it would have been awkward to have them and me competing for Marcus and Chelsea's attention on the same day. I accepted it. I marked the following Saturday on my calendar for the family dinner. I bought Deshawn a card and a gift. A nice watch, the kind Gerald had worn. Because Deshawn had once told me he thought his grandfather was the most dignified man he had ever known. I wrapped it carefully. I was ready. On Thursday evening, 2 days before the dinner, Marcus called again. He sounded casual and apologetic in equal measure. He said something had come up. Chelsea's parents had extended their visit, and the family was going to do something together on Saturday, something that had already been arranged, and it would be better to reschedule our dinner for the following weekend. He said he was sorry. He said we would absolutely make it happen. I said, of course. I said not to worry. I said, give Deshawn my love. I set the wrapped gift on my dining room table where I would see it every day. The following Saturday, the day the dinner was supposed to have happened before it was rescheduled, I woke up with something restless in my chest. I cannot explain it exactly. It was not suspicion in any logical sense. It was something older and quieter than that. Something that I think women of a certain age, women who have spent decades reading people, develop whether they want to or not. I got dressed. I drove to Marcus in Chelsea's neighborhood. I told myself I was just going to drive by. I told myself I only wanted to see if Chelsea's parents' rental car was still in the driveway, which would confirm they were still in town. And the story made sense. I turned onto their street and slowed down. There were 4 cars in the driveway and 2 more parked along the curb in front of the house. I recognized Marcus's car and Chelsea's SUV. There was a silver sedan I did not recognize and a large black truck that belonged to Chelsea's father because I had seen it at their wedding. Through the large front window of the house, I could see lights and movement and what looked like a table set with food. I pulled over across the street and I sat there for a moment. Then I saw Deshaun through the window. He was laughing, and someone was handing him something. And there were people around him, and it was clear, unmistakably clear, that some kind of celebration was happening inside that house. A celebration that I had not been told about, a celebration to which I had not been invited. I do not cry easily. Gerald used to say I had the composure of someone who had seen too much third-grade drama to be rattled by anything. But sitting in that car across the street from my son's house, watching my grandson celebrate his graduation without me through a window, I felt something crack open in my chest that I had been holding shut for a very long time. I did not get out of the car. I did not knock on the door. I did not call Marcus's phone. Instead, I sat there long enough to take 3 slow breaths, and then I reached into my purse and I took out my own phone. And I called my attorney. Now, let me explain something. A few months before all of this, on the advice of a woman in my church whose son had gotten into financial trouble, I had spoken with an attorney about a personal matter. During that conversation, I had mentioned the money I had been transferring to Marcus, and my attorney had suggested, gently but clearly, that I document everything and consider whether any of those transfers had been made under what she called misleading circumstances. I had filed that conversation away in the back of my mind and tried to forget about it because I was not ready to think about what it implied. I was ready now. I called her that Saturday evening from the car across the street from my son's house, and I told her I was ready to move forward. I told her I wanted to send formal letters regarding the outstanding amounts. I told her I wanted everything documented and official. She asked me if I was sure. I looked at the lit window of my son's house, at the shapes of people moving around inside, celebrating my grandson without me, spending what I now understood was partly my money on a life I was not included in. Yes, I said, I am sure. My attorney sent the letters the following Monday. They were civil and professional, as she is, and they outlined the total amount transferred, the dates, and the verbal agreements Marcus had made each time regarding repayment. The letters requested a repayment plan be established within 30 days. Marcus called me 40 minutes after he received his copy. He did not sound like my son at first. He sounded like a stranger who was very angry and also very afraid. He said I had blindsided him. He said he could not believe I had done this. He said the money had been loans between family, and that going through an attorney was cold and unnecessary, and that it was going to cause problems he did not need right now. He said a lot of things. I let him say them. When he was finished, I spoke quietly. I told him I loved him. I told him I had always loved him. I told him that loving someone did not mean I was required to be invisible. I told him that I had been left out of my grandson's graduation, told the dinner was canceled twice, and I had sat across the street from his house in my car and watched Deshaun celebrate through the window. I told him I did not want an argument and I did not want an enemy. I wanted my money back. And I wanted to be treated like his mother. There was a long silence. Then Marcus said very quietly, "Mom, I didn't know you drove by." I said, "I know you didn't." Another silence. He said, "Chelsea's parents were pushing for a smaller family thing and she didn't want to." I stopped him there. I told him I did not need the details right now. I told him I had waited a long time to have this conversation, and I needed him to sit with it for a few days before we talked again. I told him to call me when he was ready to have a real conversation, not a defensive one. He called back 4 days later. He sounded different, quieter, more like himself. He said he had done a lot of thinking. He said he had been embarrassed about the money for a long time because he had borrowed more than he ever intended to, and that embarrassment had turned into avoidance, and the avoidance had made everything worse. He said Chelsea's parents had opinions about family finances that he had let influence him in ways he was not proud of. He said he was sorry. He said it more than once, and the second and third time it sounded less like an apology and more like genuine remorse, which is a different thing entirely. I asked him one question. I asked him whether Deshaun had known I wasn't invited to the graduation. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "No, Mama. Deshaun thought you had already seen him walk and that the dinner was still happening." He didn't know. I believed him about that. I have always been able to tell when my son is lying and when he is not, and he was not lying then. Deshaun called me that same evening. I do not know exactly what Marcus told him. But Deshaun called and he was upset in the way young people get when they realize the adults around them have not been handling things well. He apologized for something that was not his fault, and I told him so. I told him that his grandfather would have been at that graduation if he were alive, and that I wished I had been there, but that what mattered most was that he had done it, that he had worked hard and earned that degree, and that nothing that happened between the adults in his family could touch that accomplishment. He cried a little. So did I. We talked for almost an hour. Marcus and I are working through a repayment plan. It is not fast and it is not without awkwardness, but it is honest, and right now honesty is the most important thing. Chelsea and I have had one conversation that was brief and not entirely comfortable, but it was a start. I am not expecting everything to resolve quickly. Real things rarely do. What I want to say to anyone listening who sees themselves in this story, whether you are the mother or whether you are the child, is this. Money between family is never just money. It is trust, made tangible. It is an expression of love that can become a source of resentment when it is taken without gratitude and given without limits. I gave without limits for too long because I confused limitless giving with love. They are not the same thing. Gerald used to say, "Dorothy, you can love someone completely and still have terms." At the time, I thought that sounded unromantic. Now I understand that terms are what protect the love. Terms are what keep it from being consumed. I am 68 years old. I live in the same city where I was born. I still have my filing system and my kitchen table and my back porch. I still miss my husband every morning, and I have finally, at this age, learned to love my son clearly instead of endlessly, which I believe is the only way I will be able to love him for the rest of my life without losing myself in the process. My grandson's graduation gift is still on my dining room table. We have plans for dinner next Saturday. He asked me to make my cornbread, which his grandfather also loved. I am making 2 pans.